Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Well, this might be the last one for this particular go around. I don't know yet. If something else comes along that's pretty interesting later on this week that I just have to talk about, I'll share it. Otherwise, this will make at least 5 videos for this particular entry, so thank you again for your suggestions. And this one, it's not going to be a long one. This is more of like a short entry when it comes to my videos. In fact, I thought about making it into some kind of mixtape, but at the end of the day, it is pretty fascinating stuff, so I wanted to make sure it got its own particular entry. And in this case, what I'm talking about is an urban legend that it's weird. It's not really an urban legend when it first started and when it was made, but there are still tales now of when people go to visit this place that create the urban legend status. And you'll know what I mean, the difference here in a couple of minutes. And what I'm talking about are the domes, and some people call them the ghost domes, some just call them a regular dome. There's an official name for them, the Casa Grande domes. They're located there in Arizona, and they're quite fascinating because of this history tied to their creation. Nothing supernatural when it comes to that, but the fascinating part comes from the experiences that people have nonetheless afterward, those that visit that location. And you'll see what I mean here in just a short minute. Now, first, the history, the stuff again that's not tied to anything paranormal, supernatural, nothing along those lines. These domes, they have an instant unique look to them because obviously to you and I and everyone else watching this, there's hardly any other structure that looks like them. Well, as you see right now, this is how they look at this moment, but imagine you have to go back in time to about the early 1980s, what this would have been like in pristine condition. What had happened was in 1983, there was I'm sorry, not 1983, that's when things defaulted, but sometime in the early 1980s, there was a company that was in place to make these domes. They were there, a company called Intercon Technologies. They were creating these domes because they were going to utilize them as a location to build high, fancy, technology-oriented equipment. And when I'm talking about, like, it was as odd as it seems. It was going to be a place out there in Arizona in the middle of nowhere, because there in the 1980s there was nothing, absolutely nothing tied to anything close by to that location. So out there in the middle of nowhere, they were going to build circuit boards, they were going to build other equipment that goes into watches, they were going to build large computers. This company, Intercon Technologies, was in it for the long haul. They had huge plans. They were absolutely going to make sure that anything as far as their technologies, when it started, it was started by a team, Mr. and Mrs. Zeb. I think the lady was called Patricia, but I can't quite remember the gentleman's name here. But when they started it, they originally started this company back in California, and then in the 80s they were looking to expand there in Arizona with these domes. Unfortunately, there was an incident that occurred in California. This, by the way, seems a little interesting because people say, the research that I was looking up, this incident was there was some contaminated water of some sort that was found in one of their operations there in California, which caused them to go bankrupt. And but other stories say that this contaminated water was actually within the domes themselves, like it was there in the Arizona location, but it turns out it was not. It was in the California location. So this caused that company, Intercon Technology, to start losing money very, very quickly. So much so that all of this was timed during the creation of these domes. They weren't finished yet. These domes, obviously, they had the foundation, like the entire top area formed, but nothing in terms of any of the equipment, none of the operations, none of the heavily technology equipment that was going to be in the middle of these domes. Nothing was even close to what it had been. So, with each dome costing about $150,000 and the construction still not finished when it came to these domes. This incident that occurred in California forced Intercon Technologies to default on the loan they had received from a bank in California called Union Bank of California. And it caused them whenever that happened and they had the default on the loan, then all of a sudden these domes in Arizona were halted right there midway. It happens sometimes in business. Right now in Vegas, for example, there's still some large hotel casinos there that are halfway done. I mean, they have not finished, and that is because the companies that were trying to finish them didn't have any more money to do so, and so the buildings were just left as is. And that's what happened in this case with these domes there in Arizona. There was nothing the company could do. They eventually formed bankruptcy. They went through that process, and once that occurred, then that was it for these domes. These domes were no longer in their possession. They went to the possession of the bank, that Union Bank of California. And of course, the Union Bank of California didn't do anything as far as finishing the rest of these domes. They just held on to the land and held on to the building itself as is, waiting for another owner to arrive. So that's at least the prehistory. Eventually the domes were sold to their current owners, another company, this one called Simplicity Communications, also by a husband and wife team of sorts. I think their last names were Peer. Yeah, Daniel and Karen Peer. They purchased it back in 2006 at a cost to them of about $750,000. I don't know exactly what they were trying to do with these domes, because ever since then they've been trying to sell them, but nobody has been interested in purchasing them. And as even more hardship for them, they've had to maintain the property there in a current, I guess you could call it, clean status, because what had happened was, ever since the property was abandoned in those mid 80s, because of the bankruptcy, there have been vandalism and illegal dumpings occurring there right at those domes. And every time that has happened, these poor owners, since they owned it, at least since 2006 going forward, they've had to make sure that as owners now of these properties, they've had to make sure that everything is up to par with the county. So anybody that decides, let me go ahead and take this trash and I'm just going to dump it there in the domes, guess what? These poor owners, they have to take care of it afterward. Otherwise, the county there will actually fine them, because they're the owners. They can't fine the people that actually did the dumping, because those people cannot be located, but the owners sure can. And then that's where the owners, again, I don't quite understand the reasoning. They're not seemingly understanding the reasoning either, because now they've been trying to desperately sell it because of all the incidences of them having to take care of business. And that's what the domes have become. That's how they've gained an urban legend status. There are people that go there, it's just to party around. You'll see obviously all these pictures. There are people that go there to do graffiti on the domes. There are people that go there to experience an abandoned location with a state of decay, like a state of living decay, as I've mentioned in other past videos. It's that fascinating state where something is left as is and then it's no longer repaired. So you're seeing something die. As a building, as a location, you're seeing something decay almost right before your eyes. And when this happens, it creates a really eerie atmosphere, because we're also used, those of us like me, for example, that live in the city, those of you that live in some cases in smaller cities and even in the suburbs, there's always like locations that are at least being handled, being managed, waste is being disposed of, places are being kept clean. But whenever you go to something like this, it becomes unsettling. So that's why this place has become an urban legend type status, just for that. Also, the domes inside, what's interesting to note is they were created in a very unique manner. The only way that the domes could be made in that circular shape was the material that created the outer shell was actually placed on top of like a steel net, that in turn, that steel net was being held together by a balloon. As crazy as that sounds, somewhere along the way of the creation of these domes, either several balloons were put together or one large balloon was placed together, but whatever occurred, That's how the shape was made. There was the entire catalyst was the balloon inside, creating this circular curvature there inside the domes. By the way, the reason why people go there too is because of this curvature. Whenever you're inside the domes, maybe it's the acoustics and maybe it's the surroundings. Again, being in the middle of nowhere. But whenever you're inside there, there's an eerie silence that people state comes from these domes. And now this is where it ties into the more supernatural type way, because as I mentioned at the earlier my video here, nothing was supernatural about the creation of these domes, but later on people's experiences have taken on that supernatural paranormal type status. And again, when you go there in Arizona, and you visit inside the domes, particularly at night, people have said that there's a very unsettling feeling to the location. Number one, again, it's still in the middle of nowhere. So you have lots and lots of silence. Maybe you'll even be able to catch maybe some winds, the whistling of some winds every now and then. But otherwise, with it being Arizona, lots of dry heat, very little wind, there's not going to be anything as far as lots of people coming by. So you're there by yourself. Number one, that's unsettling. Number two, the inside of the dome is again completely cavernous. So there you are in the middle of nowhere inside of a dome where the sound itself has to be something where you have a let's say a silence that the tiniest amount of noise can create amplified noise around you. So let's say you hear like a pebble, perhaps by the wind, hit the outside of the dome. Well, what should be just a tiny little sound suddenly becomes far, far larger of a sound, let alone something else like the rustling of, let's say, tumbleweeds, or again, wind creeping into the dome itself, maybe through little crevasses, creating that unique whistling. It's all expanded because of the size of the dome on the inside, and then also because, again, it's so silent everywhere else. Now, where things take a further supernatural paranormal status is that people have reported, those that make the trek to this location, that there's a strange shadowy figure lurking at one of the domes, particularly towards the back area of the dome. So if for example, you're approaching the location of the domes, there's the universal front area where everybody comes through. Probably just by de facto it's because of the location of the dome to the road. But then using that as the front location, if you start going towards the back, that's where people say that there's like a strange shadow figure that lurks about. In fact, there was a website, weirdest.com, that cited an experience that someone had. They said that they were there, it was fine whenever the sun was up, but as soon as the sun disappeared, that's when everything grew unsettling. This person stated that they're in the dark, knowing that there was no one else around, because with that location again being in the middle of nowhere, you would know when someone is approaching. You just can't help but not know when someone else is going to come around, especially in a car. So they know they were by themselves. But all of a sudden, this person was hearing noises that were no longer their own, is how they put it. And they didn't see a shadow person, but they knew that someone was moving around them in that location. And it wasn't any of the typical creatures found there in the desert. No, this was something else. This was something that this person was realizing was another thing, like another entity, another person-like entity, but it wasn't themselves, and it wasn't anyone else as far as like another visitor. No, this was something else entirely. And what finally caused this person to then get the hell out of there was all of a sudden they heard the sound of something being kicked. He called it a jug. I don't know if he was meaning like, let's say, like one of those jugs of water, the ones that go into the water fountain that you drink from the bottom with a cup. I don't know if it was one of those things, but he heard something as far as like a jug being kicked. And he said he didn't, not like it fell over because of the wind, but as if somebody purposely like almost ran up to it and kicked it. And that was it. This person, whatever their original intention was of staying at the domes, no, they were out of there. They were gone, and they never came back. So that's one experience by a gentleman there in Weeders.com. His name was Wesley, by the way. Another person, a guy by the name of Trevor, stated that it was just very, very unsettling. He called something about weird vibrations, tapping noises, noises of other types there in the dome. He attributed more to, again, it being because of the factor of the dome itself being domed and everything as far as sounds being amplified, but he himself could not rule out the fact that, again, this place definitely gives off creepy vibes, is what he called it. And the reason that people also say that there's something supernatural is because not just places. This is a place for people to tag all those graffitis, but apparently this has become a location because of its remote status, and because of the unique features of the dome. That there's a location, unfortunately, for people to practice like rituals, like Satanism, almost like rituals. And while no specific case has ever been tied to these particular domes, in other words, there hasn't been any noted case of somebody being murdered and the reasons at the murder, like let's say happening there right at the domes. No, nothing as far as any kind of specific linkage, but people still say that there has the location and the ambivalence, the surrounding the ambience surrounding the location. It has become a known area for people that practice in ritualism and Satanism to still go nonetheless at night to those domes and then do their wicked things. And when that happens, then that in turn has created and made the location a paranormal haunting of sorts. And that's why I mentioned all the way back at the beginning of this video, if that's true, then this place obviously wasn't built as being any kind of paranormal place. Of all things, it was going to be a place like Dell Computers. It was going to be a place where equipment, computer technology was going to be built and supposedly lasts for decades. But now, the status that it has now, the urban legend type status, it's nothing more now than a place that is eerie, a location of living decay, and in some cases with the ritualism and the Satanism, a place that has become a paranormal, supernatural type location. No word yet if the owners, by the way, the current ones, have found any buyers. I tried to see if there was any current news that I could give on that part. It looks like those poor owners are still there to this day owning it. The only good news that they might have is still the location is in the middle of nowhere, but not too far out. Today, apparently about 3 miles away from those domes, there's a Walmart located nearby. So that's why tourism to these Arizona domes has gone up, because if people are shopping near and around the area and they hear about this as a local tourist trap, they think to themselves, why not? Let's go check it out. And so if anything is of good news to these owners, it's only the fact that eventually there's going to be some more buildings, some more commercial properties that are going to be built around that place. And when that happens, they're going to find a buyer. Somebody's going to buy it. By the way, if you want to go check out the place, you cannot do so legally. Those owners, it's their property, and they have become so, not tired, but they've just tried to stop as far as all these unwanted visitors from coming by, destroying the property. You'll see that there's lots of holes, still graffiti, lots of places there that have an urban, like that living decay status. They're trying to stop all these visitors from coming. They've put up fences, but the fences have been destroyed by the vandals that apparently like frequently going to that place. They've even tried to make sure that it's been used, those domes, as actual storage place for their own business. But no sooner did they leave their own cars or storage cars there than they found a couple days later that the cars were broken into, stuff was stolen, and then a couple days later the cars themselves were stolen. So those owners, if you're trying to go visit the place, know that it's not really open to the public. It's restricted property. If you still want to go visit, by all means, if you can. Obviously, there's people going and there's pictures being taken. Those owners, they can't be there all day long. But know that it is not public property. Instead, it's the owners are more than happy to accommodate people as long as you ask for permission ahead of time. So. Anyways, those domes in Arizona, does anyone know any other tales that I could see and hear here with regards to the comments below? If so, please share them. It'd be fascinating to hear some of that information. These domes, who knows what their eventual life will be. I predict that a couple years from now, once there's more infrastructure built around that area with other businesses, maybe even homes, that these domes there will be demolished. Eventually, you'll have the owners selling the property to someone else, and then that new owner will just, unless they decide to utilize, as crazy as it sounds, the structures right now, that'll be too costly. So most likely these domes will be demolished, and then that's it. That'll be the end of these domes. Who knows though? As far as the supernatural, paranormal status of the location, it could be that, again, nothing was started in terms of a paranormal status. It was all done just mainly as use of technology. But who knows? Maybe the area, the land, was one of those areas that was ultimately haunted all the time. And then finally somebody built on top of it and brought out the haunted status. Who knows? So if anyone has any other tales or information related to that, please post your comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.